Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm excited today to host this fireside chat with Phil Le-Brun. Phil Le-Brun is the enterprise strategist at Amazon Web Services, AWS. So we will talk about very interesting things because Phil has been in the field for more than 20 years. He started, I think, with a Sinclair ZX81, so a very old computer when he was 10 years old. He spent 25 years at McDonald's as a corporate VP and an international CIO. And now he's at AWS, having this very strategic role on enterprise strategy. So what really sets Phil apart is this unique ability to bridge the human side and the technical side of innovations. He's a firm believer that successful transformation are human-centric, and we are really converging in this point. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to that. Phil, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How are you doing?
I'm good, and Pascal, thanks for having me too. It's I think just in talking to you previously, there's an awful lot we share in terms of philosophy.
Excellent, and I think we need to organize other discussions in the future. Correct?
Absolutely.
We won't be able to cover everything today.
Absolutely not.
Yes. So I was talking about your journey. So from ZX81 to AWS. So amazing journey. A lot of things you've learned, and that we are really eager to learn from you. Can you share this experience and this evolution basically, and what you're doing today?
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be a policeman or a spaceman or something like that. And my parents bought me a Sinclair ZX81. If folks haven't seen it, it's one of these really slim plastic PCs with a stick-on keyboard, which I think costs £4, and a memory pack that plugged in the back and occasionally fell off, and everything was recorded to tape, and it was absolute magic. It opened this new world up to me. My uncle worked for the BBC. One Christmas taught me to program. We programmed a contact database, completely useless to a 10-year-old, but was my first foray into programming. This fact I could create something with my TV and this PC was fantastic. And I subsequently...
If I remember well, those computers are like type machine. It's like it's all flat. There is no screen like this, and the screen is flat. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, the screen was your home TV. I think it was a black and white TV you tuned with a rotary control at the time, but it just plugged into that, which was a little annoying to my parents because either I was programming or they were watching TV. You couldn't do both.
So you've been passionate by technology since early in your life, and how did you get to where you are today? So through McDonald's and so on.
Serendipity. I think it just. Okay. I was lucky. I had a biology teacher at school that was into computers, so we learned a little bit at school. I got into electrical engineering, started to build things, became a radio amateur. Went to university thinking I'd do a 3-year electrical engineering course and I'd just be building stuff, not realizing it was 90% mathematics. And then part-time I worked at McDonald's, and long story short, I was on the receiving end of some global projects that weren't so great. I was asked if I wanted to be part of the solution, so I ended up moving to Chicago and working with some phenomenal folks to transform the technology at McDonald's, to take what was a very fragmented set of technology to a more standardized set across 120 countries. And then in 2017, started the digital transformation, which added things like mobile ordering, home delivery, self-order kiosks across what is now about 40,000 restaurants. And 5 years ago, I joined AWS, which was never on my career radar.
And now you have a key role. I really would love to have your role, by the way. That's a nice role, huh? Being able to have this strategic eye on all the projects that are happening at the same time. That's a great opportunity to see a variety of of projects and be able to gather all the experience from those, the lessons learned from all those, and the richness that comes from this is all in your mind now. So I would love to get a bit more of this. Next question is, you've regularly compared AI to historical transformations like electricity, like the printing press. What makes this parallel particularly compelling for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because in my role, the team meets about 1,700 customers a year, mainly C-suite and board of directors. And part of our job is to help inspire, but also help to inform and educate. And we take a lot away from history. As you well know for your career, what has happened before happens again, but perhaps with different people, with different technology. And one of the things we talk about a lot is what we call general purpose technologies. Could be the printing press or electricity or the PC or internet. More recently, generative AI. And it's those technologies which become cheaper and cheaper over time, permeate everything we do, and open up a whole new world of opportunity, which I think with machine learning and generative AI, we can't even imagine what's possible. If you ask someone in the 1900s, early 1900s, what was possible with electricity, they struggled to think. In fact, in 1879, when Edison lit his first street, the newspaper said, well, that's mildly interesting, but it's not going to change the world. And yet it fundamentally changed the world. The same with the internet, with e-commerce and the such like. And I think we're at the same tipping point with machine learning and generative AI and technology in general. But we also know it's only when people's skill sets and how we get work done, when they change, that's when the magic happens. Just like we saw with factories in the late 18th century, 19th century, where those hierarchies and silos and specialization and roles like managers got invented. And then productivity suddenly took off. We're only at the starting point of that with the technology we have today.
Curiosity, adaptability, and those are typical skills that we all need to succeed in this new world. When discussing AI risks, you've mentioned that historical technological risks were often predictable. So, question for you: how can organizations be proactive rather than reactive in managing AI risks, based on your experience and what you see on the ground and in your role as a strategist?
Well, firstly, I don't think we can let the potential of the future risk stop us experimenting. Use the word curiosity. I love that because it's uniquely human. It's as a child, when you asked, why is the sky blue? And those questions which now we'd never ask because often we've had the curiosity knocked out of us. So we see some amazing things done despite the uncertainty about the future, about legislation and such like. So I get to work with organizations like Genomics England, which are working to improve genomics testing to diagnose, treat and prevent diseases using our technology, or Swindon Borough Council, who's using Amazon Bedrock to make their documentation more accessible to people with learning difficulties. So there is so much richness to have, and I'm particularly excited with things like healthcare and life science, what we can do to improve the quality of people's life. But we can't ignore the risks. There's a bunch of resources out there, but I think it starts with culture. This is about ethics. It's about responsible AI. It's about, does the team that is creating a machine learning model or creating an application with generative AI, do they reflect the customers you're serving? Are you looking at your data in terms of bias? Do people know what hallucinations are and how to detect and potentially eliminate them? So we had some news out of reInvent last week where we're doing some really interesting stuff around mathematics in terms of figuring out whether a foundation model is producing hallucination or not. So we have a bunch of courses to help there, things like responsible artificial intelligence practices in a series we call AWS Skills Builder. I just went through the AWS AI practitioner certification. I'm still technical, nowhere near as technical as I used to be, but it just gave me a good foundation, not just to understand the technology, but also to understand my responsibility in using it and some of those uniquely human attributes we need to bring to the table, like critical thinking. Does that answer look right? What am I going to do to validate it? So just questioning some of the output, as well as obviously looking at things like security, compliance, and governance. Again, there's courses available there, but this is more than just going on a training course. It's more than setting up another governance team in your organization. It's really about having a very ethical, culturally embedded mindset about how you're going to use data and machine learning to serve your customers.
So as I hear you, it's before all a question of culture, correct? It's about embedding into the corporate culture those components of education around biases, around transparency, around privacy. So I agree with you that going through a course doesn't solve all this. It's before all a question of attitude and culture, in the sense of making sure our teams keep themselves updated on what are the new opportunities that technology can bring to us, but also what are those limitations and risks, additional risks that they can bring. And this makes me think about one of the things that you mentioned recently, regarding skills. You mentioned that about 72% of UK businesses have vacancies for digitally literate workers, but only 11% of applicants have the necessary skills for those jobs. So we see this gap. How do you think organizations should address this challenge?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because we did a survey across a lot of the European, Middle East, and African countries recently. What we found is, not just with machine learning and generative AI, but with digital technology in general, there's a 3.4 trillion euro opportunity in the European Union alone. I think in the UK it's about 540 billion. If we can tap into the potential of this technology through to 2030. The biggest gap.
This is an opportunity in money.
Real money for countries, for businesses, to really use this technology to drive efficiencies, new ways of appealing to customers, coming up with new products, new ideas, and the such like. But by far, the biggest gap was skill sets. And I think often we think of skill sets about, well, the young generation will want the skills and the old generation won't. We actually saw a desire from baby boomers all the way through to Gen Z to acquire these skills, and often a frustration that they weren't given that opportunity. But it's not even just across the age dimension, it's also across seniority. We know that one of the most important things to happen in organizations is that senior leaders learn how to use technology. If we asked a CEO whether the CEO understood finance or didn't like people, they'd look at you strangely, even though they've got a chief HR officer and a chief finance officer. And yet with technology and data and change management, I think it's very easy for non-technologists to say, yeah, that's why I've got a CIO. So I think what we see is, if you start at the top, if you set the shadow of a leader, a curious leader who says, I'm going to learn a little bit about machine learning and data, and I'm going to talk about what I've learned and also the problems I've had, where have I struggled? What mistakes have I made? So starting at the top is really critical. I got the absolute privilege of talking to Indra Nuri recently, who's the former CEO of PepsiCo and a board member of Amazon. And she was saying, if you're a leader and you stop being curious, you're not really a leader anymore, because you have to be pushing the boundaries. But beyond that, these leaders I see do a good job here. They recognize that learning isn't something you do after you've done your work, but learning is something you do as part of your work. They create space in their organization to do that. There is so much bureaucracy and wasted time that they actively go after that to create an opportunity to learn, because much of the good learning happens on the job. They hire people who are curious, because if you hired me because I was a brilliant machine learning engineer, In 5 years' time, you may no longer need a brilliant machine learning engineer. But what you will need is someone who's curious, who wants to improve customer experiences, who wants to learn. And then treating training as an investment, not a cost. There's the old skit, you've probably seen it, where the CFO says to the CEO, I'm worried if I train my people, they'll leave. And the CEO says, I'm worried if I don't, they'll stay. So how do you invest in those people and then give them the opportunity to get hands-on with the technology? I have access to the same technology right here at home as an enterprise does. The question is an enterprise going to take advantage of what they have access to today?
Exactly. That's very, very, very interesting and very aligned with what I see as well on the ground. I think having the C-level management leaders being role models in showing curiosity, adaptability, willingness to learn those new technologies, not only talking about it, but really being hands-on and showing this to the as a role model to the rest of the company is critical. And yeah, definitely. And again, to the point that courses, lessons, getting certifications today is something that has a value, but less and less value. And the most important value is our attitude and how we keep ourselves updated and we update our skills on a regular basis. I like this the statistics from the World Economic Forum that says that the lifespan of skills over the last 3 decades has diminished by 3 times. So meaning when we learn something today, the average, I mean, it really depends on the skill, but for technical skills, it's going to be valid for the coming 5 years. While 30 years ago, it was valid for 15 years. So it's really, and this trend will go on, shrinking of this lifetime of skills, meaning that we need to learn how to learn, basically, and do it faster.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and also as an employee, I want to go to an organization which is going to help me develop to learn stuff and then allow me to practice that too. So it's actually become an attractor and a retainer for employees. It shouldn't be seen as just an add-on, because as you say, these days of going to school, learning something, and then using that skill for the rest of your career and then retiring, those days are decades gone.
Definitely. And I think the way we learn now is also different from before. I think we do more experiments. We need to experiment. I mean, basically, when we are talking about generative AI, a lot of what it can do, even the people who build it don't know about it. It's by using it and by trying to fulfill your own needs that you find out that it does this, it can do that. We all heard about those emergent capabilities that are coming from large language models. It's us, the users, to discover them, and it's in the context of what is useful to us. So it's really about using it as often as possible, and in the right context of things that are useful to us, that we discover new use cases, new ways to improve our work and to augment ourselves. And I think companies and leaders should reward this. And I'm getting to the point of the KPIs, the key performance indicators, should be reviewed and adapted to incentivize people to take the risk to fail in experimenting, to take the risk to lose time in using a tool that might not be the right one, but at least they tried it, and also rewarding the fact that people automate some of their work. Okay, we shouldn't. I mean, and also reward the people who augment, elevate some of their skills thanks to artificial intelligence. So this should be part of the KPIs and should be monitored and rewarded by leaders, I think.
Well, absolutely, especially in the knowledge economy, because we still have organizational structures in most organizations that were absolutely brilliant in the 19th century. But we're in the 21st century now, and we talk about knowledge work. We hire these bright people, and we know that the brightest people, the people who want to invent, who want to be creative, who want to improve their customers' or citizens' lives, they're the very first people who will leave if they feel they can't do it. So why would you hire these people and not let them invent and experiment? They're also the closest to their customers. So this idea that the folks at the top know the most about their customers, it's actually no longer the case. So how do we create an environment where individuals can actually experiment? And I think we even need to change the language, because often we talk about experiments and failure. The reality is, when was the last time, Pascal, you saw a 5-year project plan put together and someone got to the end of the project plan and said, oh my God, we're on time and on budget, and the customers loved it? I mean, it just doesn't happen. It rarely happens. If you're building a housing estate, where we've done it a million times before, and it's predictable, sure, but we're talking about invention here. And invention happens across the organization, not because of the silos, and it often happens at the forefront, at the point closest to the customer, not at the point at the highest point of the hierarchy.
Completely aligned with you. I read something that you wrote, or you said, I don't remember. 30% of our time should be spent learning. Can you explain?
Yeah, I talked about this last week. We talk about reskilling. So a hot topic. Do we retrain the people we have? Do we bring in people with the skills? I'm a massive proponent that most organizations have the people they need. They don't have the skills. So they have dedicated people who understand their business or organization. Now, how do we give them the skills? And yeah, we are a bit provocative. We say about 30% of someone's time should be spent learning. And of course, no one puts their hand up and says, oh yeah, that's great, because by Thursday afternoon I'm bored, and that'll fill Thursday afternoon and Friday up. The natural reaction says, I don't have time. But if you really dig into the organization, we see two things. One is the amount of wasted time. Me waiting for someone to test my product, or requirements to be signed off, or something to be released to production, or all of these handoffs. So there is a massive amount of waste in organizations. In fact, one report, the worst report I saw said the average developer spends 5 hours a week developing. So by Monday lunchtime, they're done. So they're waiting for folks.
5 hours per week. Wow.
Yeah,
5 hours out of 40 hours.
It's crazy, because obviously they're probably doing some architecture and QA, but they're also waiting for decisions that'll probably be taken 6 levels above them that they could have taken. They're waiting for all of these gatekeepers to sign off, QA, the CISO, and the such like. How do you cut that back so people have the time? But I think the other point is, a lot of what we do should be learning in organizations. So for instance, if you're an agile organization, doing retrospectives, that's a learning opportunity. Even if you're not an agile organization, what worked, what didn't work in your last project? Rather than having status meetings, why don't you use meetings to solve real problems? Reverse mentoring. So not just mentoring from senior down, but also helping folks who are more senior understand the potential of technology, and integrating all of those learning opportunities in your day-to-day work. So it's not about just taking a day and a half off and doing a course. It's actually about rethinking how we do work, and the fact that if we're truly experimenting, truly trying to understand what the customer wants, all of those are learning opportunities.
I love it. I like to say that there is a lot when you have a look to what we do on a regular basis. And the easiest way is to have a look at our calendar of the last 1, 2, 3 weeks and see what are the tasks that we spend time on. And I like to say that there are 3 types of tasks. The first one is those that we can eliminate. And exactly what you said, those meetings, for example, where we sit, where we shouldn't be there because our opinion or the fact that we're informed is not so important, or we can be informed in other ways, or logistics and a lot of things. The second is those tasks that can be automated. And to identify those tasks, I usually recommend to identify those 20% of tasks where you spend the highest amount of time. And the third category are those tasks where AI can elevate our skills, can basically amplify our strengths. And I'm thinking here about creativity, about the capacity to connect with others, about critical thinking. So it's about putting all the tasks that we do today in one of those 3 buckets and deal with that.
I agree, because it's not that anyone's doing anything wrong in an organization, it's the environment we've created. So someone once said, obliterate, don't automate. So as you said, that idea, question whether we should be doing something at all before we automate it, and then using the tools we have to make it easier to do a great job. We have a solution called Amazon Q Developer, for instance. Our developers were using that. They were 57% more productive. I'm an old developer, meaning I'm old and I used to be a developer, but I could use these tools to literally in minutes spin up a generative AI foundation, a large language model, and start experimenting without knowing much. But I could also do that securely, safely, without sort of screen scraping code off the internet and the such like. So I think a combination of all of those three things, if we do that every single day, what can we eliminate? What can we automate? How can we enhance folks in what they're doing? How can we eliminate things like PowerPoint and get back to real work? Those have a significant impact, but I think it's that constant seeking out of wasted time. We call it the bureaucratic mass index. It's a bit like BMI for the body, but how do you measure the amount of waste or fat in an organization?
I love it. Getting to my last question, what skills do you think organizations should prioritize today? That they should prioritize and develop in their teams today?
I think I typically, throughout my career, I've thought about three skill sets every time I think about my development. One is technical. So what do I need to know? And that doesn't need to be technology, but what are those skills? For instance, data science or machine learning. What is machine learning? How do I use it? What types of machine learning are there? So they're the technical skills. And as you say, they're the ones that change the fastest. The second set is...
It can be law for lawyers. It can be
absolutely
medicine for medical doctors. So this is the expertise, the field, and the depth.
100% is how do I become more competent, more able in my job? What are the advances? The second set are what I'd call business skills, and they apply to public sector too. Public sector, what is my mission? How do I contribute to our mission? In business, how do we make money? What really happens at the front line? I used to at McDonald's. We used to go out to restaurants regularly and work in restaurants, and it's really humbling. When you see how your technology is being used, you go back with a different perspective. So really understanding your own organization. The third set is those immutable skills, those things which I'd be fairly safe in saying whatever happens to technology, they're going to be essential skills. How do I build trust and psychological safety? How do we give each other feedback? So when we're experimenting, we're being honest and open about what's working, what's not working. You're giving me feedback to help me improve. Data literacy. Nearly 80% of issues with data in organizations and getting value from data are down to people, organization, and culture. And one of the biggest things is data literacy. I can tell you how many tires we sold last Wednesday, descriptive analytics, but no one's ever trained me on prescriptive or predictive analytics. How many I'm going to sell next Wednesday, and what can I do about it? And back to what you were saying earlier is, number one, how do I have a learning mindset? How do I stay curious? Even if it means occasionally sneaking off and learning something outside of my direct field. And how do I build effective teams? Because at the end of the day, most work now gets done through teams, not just solitary individuals.
Excellent. I love it. I also read one of your blogs, and you had the 6 critical success factors that you've identified in the AWS project that you're leading. Can you tell us what are those 6? And I think it's a good also summary of what we discussed about.
When we started talking about this with digital transformations, there's a few things. Does everyone know what they're doing and why? So their sense of purpose. Secondly, do they know how they're getting measured? Because a lot of these measures are very esoteric. Return on incremental capital invested doesn't mean much to a developer. In McDonald's, when we were digitally transforming, everyone knew that our target was 20,000 restaurants on e-commerce by the end of the year. Third one is use of data. So everyone having access to as much data as possible because someone's going to have some insights, but also but let's become data centric when we talk about new projects. It shouldn't be Pascal's opinion or Phil's opinion. There's certainly going to be some of that, but what's the data actually telling us? Fourthly, autonomous teams. So how do we set up these what we'd call two pizza teams in Amazon? So teams that are no larger than can be fed with two American-sized pizzas. Don't try this with the European pizza. So yeah, say 8 to 10, 8 to 12 people, but give them a mission and let them get on with it. And then the guardrails they work within. So for instance, within Amazon, we have our leadership principles. We all speak the same language. We all know how to initiate programs. We all work backwards from the customer. So these are all really basic things. But if you look at statistics, about 50% of transformations fail at step number one, which is if you talk to every executive around the table individually and ask them, what is this transformation about? Who's accountable and how do we measure it? Often you get numerous different answers. And that's why many of these transformations fail. Nothing to do with technology, just basic alignment around what problem are we trying to solve.
That is so aligned with what I've seen in my life. Success with technology and with AI is all about people. Failures is all about people as well. So AI without people is nothing, and people without AI are still people. We really need AI to improve us, augment us, and again, AI without us doesn't mean anything because it's useless.
And vice versa. I think now we have AI and machine learning. If we could just liberate 50% of the time we have at work to be more creative, we can do some unbelievably cool things.
Exactly. So it's about and the first thing in all this is identifying which tasks can be eliminated or automated so that we save this time to be able to educate ourselves, to know how to augment ourselves with technology, but also spend more time in those more uniquely human activities, like spending more time with our teams, with our kids, what really matters to our human experience, basically.
Absolutely. Wasn't it Einstein who said if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend the first 55 minutes figuring out what the problem was? And sometimes we're so quick to jump to the answer. If we spend more time really, really thinking about what our customers want and experimenting with them, that's where there's been some really interesting breakthroughs. And we're seeing that pace of change quicken. And it's those organizations that are more agile, are going to learn quicker, are willing to tap into the talent they have. They're the ones who are going to thrive in the future.
Completely aligned with you. Adaptability and resilience need to be built in the culture and in the DNA of companies, because what we've seen as innovations and frequency of changes over the last decade, over the last century, is what we will see over the next decade. So we need to be ready for a roller coaster, and our companies, our structures, organizational structures, and cultures need to be ready for that.
100%. And then we're going to see some amazing things over the next, I was going to say 10 years, as you say, it's probably 5 years, probably even shorter than that. Those organizations that can tap into everything you've just talked about, that's exciting. That's the sort of company I want to work for. That's what brought me to AWS.
Fully aligned with you, Phil. Phil, that was an amazing discussion. A lot of wisdom from your career is 30 years about, or even more.
I know I look younger. It was not quite the plan I had, but when you're working for such a large company, such a large people company as McDonald's, it gives you so much opportunity and a lot of learnings. And as you say, a lot of that's nothing to do with technology. It's about people and alignment and motivation and finding great ideas and letting people pursue those.
Phil, thanks a lot for that. That was a great discussion. I mean, we could continue for hours. Phil, you're also very present on LinkedIn. You contribute a lot as a top voice. You write a lot. You share a lot of your insights. And I encourage the audience watching us now to click on the follow button and regularly have a look to what you share. Phil, thanks a lot for your time and insight. We talked about learning, about dedicating 30% of our time to learning. We talked about the culture and the attitude and around this. We talked about hiring for curiosity, and I think that's a very important point that all leaders should keep in mind. We talked about investing in people more than in technology, or at least as much. And we talked about the critical role of leadership in modeling continuous learning for their teams. I mean, those are a few things that come back to my mind right now, but much more than that. Phil, a word for the end before we end?
Yeah, I'd just say it comes down to imagination. I think the thing that often holds us back is imagining big enough. So we always say, think big, start small, scale quickly. And yeah, that's what I really enjoy in my role, helping customers do. So really appreciate the time with you, Pascal.
Thank you, Phil. And to the audience watching us, see you next time.